Hello everyone, Lemme here, and welcome to the first update to my League starter build guide for Harvest League. So far, the Perforate Impale champion is performing amicably. I would even say better than I had anticipated. The changes to Perforate are absolutely fantastic and make the ability feel better than ever. Especially the blood version deals an incredible amount of damage, and coupled with the newly added Seismic Warcry, carries the majority of the damage needs while you're struggling for gear, as every melee usually does. As with the last time, this video will be broken down to multiple segments for ease of reference. You can find the timestamps to each section down in the pinned comment down below, as well as in the description as per usual, so please take advantage of that in case of any questions or uncertainties. Furthermore, you can also see the digital timestamps on the timeline in the video now. If anything is left open that needs further information or discussion, feel free to hit me up in the comments or over on my stream. Should be fairly easy to get a hold of me. I'm currently streaming Path of Exile daily, as is usual during the first few weeks of the league. Moving into the first segment, I'll quickly update you on my overall progress in the league to provide a rough time outline for you to strive towards with the changes to the build I'll be mentioning in the second segment. In the background, you'll be able to see footage of my current character in Harvest League, running an early red tier map. My slash playtime is at around 30 hours at the moment, just for reference's sake. Overall, the build has progressed in this league fairly steadily. I've not really hit a wall at any point, but finding or crafting weapons hasn't really worked out for me until the low red tier maps. As a result, my offhand and my main hand weapon are a little bit behind comparatively to where I would like to be in the game at the moment. This has not really hampered the clear speed or bossing at all though, for the most part, as you can clearly see on the background. Seismic Cry has quickly become an absolutely integral part of this build, which leads me to the first big change already. We are no longer going to be taking multi-strike in our 6-link, or anywhere for that matter, as it will not work with the exertion benefit of the Seismic Cry. This is something I had anticipated however and warned about in the comments of the previous video. I have instead opted to take the Rage support gem as an additional flat physical damage increase as well as a quality of life improvement due to the attack and movement speed the Rage provides. Using Rage has helped a lot with the typical weapon related issues that melee struggle with, and coupled with the Master of Metal Ascendancy node and Perforate's innate physical damage gained in the 3.11 patch, I've not had to upgrade my weapons at all since reaching maps, mostly playing with 2 times around like 200 physical DPS one-handed swords up until the early red tier maps. The Harvest League mechanic itself has proven to be a bit less of a help than I had anticipated and honestly hoped for. I had hoped that it would be a bit easier to craft yourself a decent weapon throughout the entire game, especially early on during the mapping process when it's needed the most, but so far I've had absolutely no luck for any crafts to be good on my weapons at all. I would describe the majority of crafting options as more of a fossil spamming endeavor rather than a target crafting or a specific mid-level item. What the mechanic has done however is make me carry around a couple of rares, usually 1 or 2 eye level 83 plus Corsair swords, a couple of Cobalt and Viridian gems and maybe a gauntlet or boot in order to craft them on the quick. While of course you can access your storage during the crafting process, I find it a lot easier to remember what I'm even looking for in my crafts if I continue to see the items in my inventory. As for why I chose to carry around Corsair swords instead of jeweled foils, it's quite simply due to their alignment towards physical rolls. Where thrusting swords, such as the foils, are more aligned towards elemental rolls, the Corsair swords are the best base with a physical inclination, and as a result, grant the highest possible chance to end up as a decent weapon when you spam them with what are essentially jagged fossil crafts in the Harvest crafting window. Against bosses such as the Conquerors, the build has performed very well. The toughest one to fight has definitely been Baran, due to his tendency to go completely invisible in the current patch, making it very hard to anticipate his movements, attacks, and the like. Coupled with his mana soaking squares, which just completely take you out of the fight for a few seconds, as you need to regenerate an attack's worth of mana before re-engaging, or waiting for him to come to you in general, while also dodging his invisible attacks. The easiest one for me has honestly been El Hazmin, which is quite surprising as he used to be the one I struggled with the most in the previous iterations of the build. However, as he is the squishiest of the Conquerors and at the beginning of the fight stands still for a long time, it has enabled the build to simply burst him to death before he even starts moving, completely trivializing the fight itself through the sheer power of the Bloodstones and the added exertions from the 2 to 3 Seismic Cries thanks to the second wind support. The next update for my character will include a Cluster Jewel, as we'll see on my updated POB as well. For Cluster Jewels, there's also going to be a pretty major change due to all the nerfs and removals the Cluster Jewel mechanic has seen in 3.11. I'm not 100% certain which node will be the best possible for our build quite yet, but after the preliminary glance at all the notables and the comparison between DPS numbers and quality of life, I believe that the Blood Scent notable from the Accent Sword large cluster will be our best bet. I will try to provide continuous updates on the cluster jewel situation, as it's quite the challenge to completely figure out what A, the best choice is, and B, is actually feasible to get for people, now that the crafting of them has been severely hampered. Especially Bloodsand itself seems to be incredibly rare, with only a 54 waiting. For now, I'll be going for the Bloodsand, and I'll see what I can realistically expect to get with it by crafting a bunch of them over the next couple of days. I'll hopefully be able to give you more complete rundown for what cluster jewel we're looking for in the next update. I sincerely apologize that there is so much uncertainty with this particular upgrade, but I would rather do some in-depth testing and analyzing than just make up some values and recommend something that isn't worth the recommendation in the first place. So, for now, just try to get yourselves a Bloodsand and 2 jewels, and we'll see where we go from there in the next update. The Divine Flesh Timeless Jewel will be probably my last update before I start saving up for the big spenders, like a Railroad, Paradoxico, or the Savior. I imagine this to be about, like, a week away, though, but we'll see how my luck progresses in this league, because I'm still waiting for my first Exalted drop at this moment in time, so I'm a little bit short on cash, is what I'm saying. As for the last talking point in the quick update section of my guide, I'll also be trying to acquire the +2 Perforate spikes enchant fairly soon, which I have actually done in my last stream since I wrote this script. It's something I've always had a life search on to make sure that I can catch the first few going up for reasonable good prices on a good base, as the +2 spikes enchant will tremendously boost our damage, both AoE and single target, as well as our quality of life in terms of clear quality and speed. I have now acquired this on a Lion's Pelt base, and it has been pretty nice to get. It increases your DPS, especially against bosses, tremendously. The Bloodstones with the 2 additional spikes, as well as switching over from Sand to Bloodstones for a total of +4 spikes, basically gives you a roughly 50% more multiplier to your normal attacks, which is pretty insane. Definitely looking forward to seeing the enchant in action once I'm able to procure it on a good base. As with the original guide video, I'm currently looking mostly for the Sarkhanger's Head with the enchant, but have decided against it, as I just mentioned, simply because the Sarkhanger's Head with the enchant was extremely expensive comparatively to the Lion's Pelt. Try to go for a helmet that at least has an eye level of 84, just so you can get the interesting rolls as well. 85 would probably be the best, so try to get it on 85 actually, now that I think about it, just so you can get all the influence mods that could potentially roll on a helmet. Moving on to the segment, the quick overview for all the people that just want to get the general update on the guide, so let's get started with that. Continue to focus to get around like 5.5k HP is kind of still our goal. 8 to 10k armor unbuffed, my apologies for that one, as well as 2 weapons with at least 350 physical DPS before you get into the higher tier red maps. I'm currently running around 320 to 330 PDPS weapons, and you can definitely tell that it's missing about like 20 to 30 PDPS to really feel good. While it is possible to run the higher tier red maps, you will feel the damage being a little bit too low for most bosses that have like some kind of like terrible map mods, like 40% physical damage reduction or something like that. So try to aim for 350 plus is what I would recommend. In order to sustain your mana, you'll want to pick up a Viridian Jewel with physical leeched as mana as early as possible. You can simply socket this one below the Scion Life Wheel to sustain your mana, really. Alternatively, you can take the Life and Mana Leech node near Valpact, though you would have to go there, or take the Mana Leech node in the bottom right corner of the tree if you manage to path over there later on. The last option is of course always adding it to any of your amulets or gloves, weapons, whatever. There are a ton of options for you to choose from, so just make sure you get any one of them. You don't need more than one, by the way, so don't try to get like 4 of them, it's not going to really help you. To increase damage, we're still focusing on critical strike multiplier, flat added fizz, and attack speed, in that order. Survivability wise, flat life is the absolute best way to go. Get as much and as many pieces of your equipment as you can. Outside of HP, any additional armor basically becomes temporary HP. One quick update on the VMS versus Molten Shell argument. I would recommend using the VMS as a general protection during mapping, simply popping whenever available, while you keep your Molten Shell for the really dangerous situations. Basically, flip the entire VMS and Molten Shell dynamic on its head. Where you would use VMS in the last league, use Molten Shell, and vice versa. It should be fairly easily understandable. We'll still be going for a large amount of Chaos resistance later on, of course, and I'm still looking for that Born of Chaos notable on the small jewel cluster, at least one of them. One side note here, though, is that small cluster jewels seem to be able to acquire 2 notables now. I'm not sure what is going on here, so for now, I'll just recommend to get one of them, and we'll see how it progresses, whether that's a bug or if that's intended. I'll update you in the next update video on that one, whether you should be getting, like, Bone of Chaos plus something else, or just Bone of Chaos. Just go for Bone of Chaos now if you're already at that point where you need the Chaos Resistance for Divine Flash. We'll see how that goes. As for our Ascendancy choices, nothing has changed. Get the notables in the following order for the easiest and smoothest experience in the league. Master of Metal, Unstoppable Hero, Conqueror, and Worthy Foe. If you are, however, using Cyclone with this guide, firstly, like, seriously, what's wrong with you? And secondly, you'll want to take Unstoppable Hero after all, as you lost your start immunity in the 3.11 patch. Simply link up Fortify with your 6-link Cyclone and you'll be good to go. For weapons, Jeweled Foils are still the absolute best until you can get yourself an endgame upgrade, such as the Savior or well-rolled Paradoxica. However, as mentioned earlier, Corsair Swords are the best bases to actively craft your physical-based harvest crafts on, due to their natural inclination towards other physical rolls, making it easier to acquire halfway decent upgrades somewhat reliably, at least in theory. For the endgame upgrades, we might end up picking an extremely well-rolled Jeweled Foil over our Paradoxica, as the ceiling for weapons was heavily increased due to the potential of harvest crafting, and as such will likely outshine the Paradoxica in the absolute endgame circumstances. For now, however, I think Paradoxica will still serve as our easiest endgame choice, until it becomes apparent at what level of Jeweled Foils and currency investment we're actually looking at with Harvest League. As for intermediate upgrades, aim for around 350 PDPS swords, as I mentioned. It should be fairly easy to acquire 1 or 2 one-handed swords with that particular hallmark in mind, if you're at this stage of the game. They go for around like 20 to 50 chaos at the moment. The Savior will still be our absolute best endgame option, however, providing the biggest DPS and clear boost you can ever acquire, and you should think of it like the headhunter for a build. So start saving up those Exiles around the time that you consider yourself settled well into the high tier maps, and finish up your Atlas, because you'll need a bunch of them. Savior is expensive, yo. Our additional endgame upgrades continue to include the Bottle of Faith, which will replace your Jade Flask and a potential Explosion body armor. However, having played with the new Perforate for a while, I don't think that the Explosion will be mandatory any longer. While it is always a popular and great choice to increase clear speed, don't get me wrong, I don't have the feeling that we will be needing it, especially once we get our enchant. As a result, consider the other options mentioned in the previous video, such as physical damage taken as chaos, base attack rate, or maybe even the frenzy charge on hit. I'll be updating you with what I decided to go with once I get to that point in my personal progression. As of the current time, I'm aiming towards the physical damage taken as chaos and the base crit mods. Right now, I'm still wearing a Tabula though, because I got one dropped in Act 8, and there was no reason to buy a different one, because they're expensive, so I decided not to buy one yet, so we'll see how that goes. For the gem setup, I've chosen to go with the following 6-link: Perforate, melee physical damage, Impale, Rage, Close Combat, and lastly, Pulverize. I find this setup to be a nice balance of raw damage and quality of life increases, with the increased area of Pulverize, the speed provided by Close Combat, and the vast amount of quality of life provided by the Rage support. Alterations to the 6-link would include replacing either the Close Combat or Pulverize gem with a Brutality one, in case you desire a higher raw damage output, at the cost of clear speed due to the need to drop Herald of Ash, as well as losing the travel speed or AoE components of the replaced gems respectively. Later on, once we get our Cluster Jewel, we'll replace the Rage support with a Ruthless support instead. There's not many suitable support gems anymore, unfortunately, so Ruthless will just have to do the job. If you run into problems sustaining your Fortify on bosses, however, consider adding it to your main link instead of Rage or Ruthless. My 4 links are looking as follows and should be fairly similar to you from my original guide, because they're literally the same. Your Leap Slam setup is still Leap Slam for mobility, faster attacks of Blood Magic depending on whether you need mana or not, Fortify, because we need Fortify, and Endurance Charge or Melee Stun to get our Endurance Charge generation going. Your cast when damage taken setup is still Val Molten Shell as a 21-23 if you can acquire one. Cast when damage taken at level 3 and Feeble at the highest level your int can handle, but obviously a maximum of 7, which is what I currently have, and an increased duration support at 20-20 or 21-20 or 21-23 depending on what you can acquire. Outside of the 4 links, which haven't changed at all, these are my current auxiliary gems, which are also pretty similar to what we had before, but there are small changes in them, so pay close attention. Ancestral War Chief. as the increased per hit damage is substantially more important than the speed this time around due to the exertion mechanic from Seismic Cry. Blood Rage, Flesh and Stone, but without being supported by Maim, and at least for now, as we simply lack the gem slots for it. We would have to give up something else in order to take the Maim here. I'm currently considering to drop Precision in order to link Maim together with Flesh and Stone, but I haven't made the decision 100% yet. We'll see how it continues, and I'll update you as per usual in the next video. Blood and Sand, Dread Banner, Herald of Ash, as I still prefer the clear speed over the single target that HOP provides, especially after the nerf. And obviously Precision, which I keep at a low level, around like 1 to 3 for the increased critical strike chance. As I mentioned earlier, I am considering to drop it, potentially for the main support on Flesh and Stone, but I'm not 100% sure about that yet. Our newest addition to this list is, of course, the Seismic Cry, supported by Second Wind. This is a fundamental part of a build at this point and cannot be replaced. You need this setup, otherwise the build won't feel as good and perform a lot worse. So get this one as soon as possible, which is around level 31, when you can finally acquire the Second Wind support. Never take it out ever again. It's ridiculously good, seriously. The last gem shot I've personally used for my darling, the Smoke Mine. I'll be covering my usage of this one later in the combo segment of this video, where I'll be showing off the general playstyle and how I personally use each part of the build and each chosen gem in combination, as I feel that's something many players might struggle with, especially on a build that requires as many button presses as this one. Our passive tree has also seen a few alterations from the intended build path that I presented in the original video. Firstly, we will not be taking the instant Warcry keystone, which saves us 2 passive points that we now spend on getting ourselves the Wind Dancer keystone instead. When we're not a dodge or evasion based character, we naturally have a 50% evasion chance due to the blinded enemies, coupled with the roughly 3,000 to 4,000 evasion rating we get for free from being a champion. Usually we end up around like a 60 to 70% evasion chance against blinded enemies, which will make Wind Dancer work quite nicely for us. While it won't be up all the time by any stretch, having this as a defensive layer, especially against bosses, which shouldn't hit you very often in the first place, is extremely worthwhile. Secondly, we'll no longer be taking the Imbalanced Guard keystone either, once we reach the roughly 20,000 armor we're looking for. Up until the point you reach the 20,000 armor reliably, however, you still want to use it. After 20,000 armor, the keystone becomes quite useless, as barely anything in the game even deals enough physical damage to reduce our natural physical reduction from armor below the 50% point. As a result, having it capped at 50% actually hurts us, rather than helps us, as a natural physical reduction at 20,000 plus armor is higher than 50% against nearly every single attack in the game, barring like a Shaper Slam or the likes, aka attacks you won't even survive anyway, even if you take the keystone. So just don't take it once you reach that point. We'll be anointing the Measured Fury notable in order to gain 1 additional exertion on a Seismic Cry. It will be a huge damage and clear increase as they stack incrementally, so try to get this one done as soon as you get yourself an amulet you consider worthy of an anointment that costs or golden ore or higher. Lastly, we'll also be adding a medium-sized Thread of Hope to pick up the following notables and minor nodes: Disciple of Unyielding, Disciple of Slaughter, Versatile Stance, and lastly, the Area of Effect in Sand Stance and Damage and Blood Stance, minor node. These should add quite a bit of damage and quality of life, so consider them fairly worthwhile. However, don't fret about these, as they'll likely be the last like 4 to 5 points starting level 90, so don't try to like buy yourself an overpriced Thread of Hope right now. You really don't need it for like probably a long while. So yeah, that pretty much covers the major changes to the skill tree and gem setups. If I have missed anything, it will be included in the POB, which I'll be providing 2 of. One is the full version of last week, updated with the changes outlined here, and one is my current character. Feel free to compare the 2 POBs and copy my current character, as it's more an in-progress example, rather than the perfect ideal provided in the finished POB, which is never entirely realistic to achieve in the process of an early league. For a more in-depth step-by-step leveling guide or upgrade guide past the story, please refer to my original guide video, which will be linked in the description down below. It's still fairly accurate on all of those things. Now, let's move on to our last segment for this update, the combo and usage guide I mentioned earlier. I'll be showing off the basic combos and the general idea behind each gem in this following section, so that you may copy this style in order to fully utilize this build's capabilities and each item and gem included in it. First things first, you'll want to remain in Sand Stance pretty much throughout 95% of your clear, only switching to Blood Stance to quickly burst rares or other tanky specimens of enemies you will encounter. Sand Stance will also provide a large portion of your survivability and clear, so don't switch away from it too often for no particular reason. Now, let's start with movement. If you've chosen to follow my recommendation of the smoke mine, you should have slowly gotten used to the throwing and detonating rhythm to use it as quickly as possible to get around near instantly. The overall movement through a map will see a very basic combo. The main movement skill is Leap Slam, of course. I use it to jump into a pack of enemies, to stun them and gain endurance charges, at which point I normally attack once and then use my Seismic Cry, attack again until they're dead, and Leap Slam away to the next pack, as a close combat support will make that near instant. If there is no pack available nearby, or there is a pack very close by, I usually use my smoke mine to travel part of the distance. You want to intermittently use your smoke mine between each use of Leap Slam, if you haven't hit an enemy recently with your Perforate. This is due to the overall animation cancelling that was introduced in 3.9, which made the first use of any travel skin instant, at the cost of putting the wind-up cooldown at the end. As a result, if you simply spam Leap Slam, you'll realize that the second use and farther will have a slight lag time compared to the first. Using Smoke Mine in between each travel use of Leap Slam, aka a use exclusively used to move around the map instead of specifically hitting enemies, you will negate this wind-up cooldown, as it will be cooling down as you travel with the Smoke Mine teleport. Applying this in-game will function like this for traveling. Leap Slam, into Smoke Mine, into Leap Slam, into Smoke Mine, into Leap Slam, etc. This is your very basic movement setup and should be second nature to you, at the latest by the time you finish the story, if you've picked up Smoke Mine after the Brutus fight in Act 1. Smoke Mine can also be used to reposition yourself during an attack, as it's counted as an instant teleportation move. As such, if you simply slow out a mine while you're attacking an enemy, and then detonate it in the middle of the sequence, you will immediately change position, which is great for dodging dangerous attacks and just displacing your own body in general, as you never really want to stand in one particular spot for a long time in this game. I will try to show off this usage in the footage in the background, but if that doesn't become quite clear, simply try it out a few times in your own hideout or in your own gameplay. It feels a lot more natural once you actively realize how the smoke mine timing and movement works, so continue to experiment with it until you feel like you've got it. Make liberal use of your Molten Shell. Simply use it whenever all of your flasks are active, specifically the Jade Flask and Lions Door are important here, to gain the most benefit out of it. As it has lost a large percentage of mitigation through the 3.11 nerfs, it is no longer useful as a guard skill in its original design and idea, really, but should rather be used as a simple passive mitigation of 30% of damage, as long as it lasts. Use Molten Shell to block the large hits from enemies now, similar to how you would use VMS in the previous leagues. I personally make very liberal use of both of these skills, nearly using them on cooldown, which provides me with a very safe and easy mapping experience for the most part. As for the basic first combo, you want to follow this exact sequence. Firstly, place your Ancestral Warchief in an area that will provide you the buff, but far enough that it doesn't get insta-gibbed by the boss you're fighting. Then, change your stance by using Blood and Sand. Please don't try to use Flesh and Stone for that, as it has a slightly longer switching cooldown. And go into Blood stance. Immediately follow up by Leap Slamming onto your target, for example a boss, to get your Fortify up and running or to refresh its duration, so that you will be unimpeded for the next 4 seconds, as you burst as much damage as you can into the enemy. Throw a Smoke Mine behind the enemy, but in melee range. Cancel the animation with your first Seismic Cry, and attack 4 times with Perforate. Afterwards, activate your Smoke Mine to change position, which will usually result in the boss having to reposition or missing you entirely with his attack. Then, Seismic Cry again thanks to your second wind support. Attack with Perforate again for the 4 times total to use up all the exerts, unless you've already anointed the Measure Fury of course, at which point you should be attacking 5 times. Afterwards, refresh your Fortify duration and reposition yourself by jumping onto the boss again and moving to a different side of it. Also switch over to Sand stance at this point to prepare for the next Blood stance switch. Once Blood and Sand's cooldown is finished, immediately switch back to Blood stance. At this point, your first Seismic Cry cooldown should be up, so use it again and attack until your exertion runs out. Afterwards, you simply switch back to Sand stance and wait for your Seismic Cry charges to return. Focus on dodging at this point and make sure to keep your Fortify up through your Leap Slam. This is your basic combo. For more advanced usage cases, you'll need to come up with those yourselves, as those are fairly difficult to specifically quantify, as it simply differs from person to person, build to build, and boss to boss. The advanced burst combos are simply case-by-case scenarios, really, so make sure to take ideas from this basic combo and apply them on a case-by-case scenario to build your own advanced combos. Every other skill gem in this build guide should be fairly self-explanatory, but if anybody had any more questions, I would gladly add them to the next video, so If you guys need more representations of the different combos or whatever, just leave a comment down below. I would very much appreciate it. Yeah. Lastly, obviously, I will be providing further update videos as long as I consider my character not done yet. I'd expect another update around like 3 to 8 days from now. I'm not exactly sure, so don't expect it too early. I still got the Chaos Report to finish as well, so yeah. If you enjoy this style of content, please leave a comment down below saying so. I might consider providing build guides for my future builds as well, if that is something you desire. And with that last segment wrapped up, this will mark the end of the update video. I hope this video was informative and you learned something from it that you can apply to your own game. Please let me know if I missed anything, or you would have wanted me to cover anything in specific that I haven't covered yet. If you want to support the creation of these videos, or the Chaos Report, or just me in general, feel free to check out my Patreon and maybe consider signing up for it. You can find a link to it in the description down below. Any and all support is highly appreciated. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell thingamabob, like and dislike the video, and check me out over on twitch.tv/lonewolf. I stream pretty much every day, and especially during the league launch period, I'm streaming an absolute ton. So, stop on by. I always like talking to people. You can find a link to the stream in the description down below as well. Of course, everything's in the description. Just take a look. And with that, thanks for watching. And keep farming those exiles.